Did you hear what I was playing, Rain?
I didn't think it polite to listen, sir.
Sorry about that, for your sakes. I don't play accurately. Anyone can play accurately, but I like to play with wonderful expression.
Yes, sir.
Have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Mm. Mm. By the way, Lane, I see that from your book that on Thursday night when Lord Shorman and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne are entered as having been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Oh, why is it that at a bachelor's establishment the servants invariably drink the champagne? I ask merely for information.
I attribute it to the superior quality of the wine, sir. I've often observed that in married households the champagne is rarely of a first-rate brand.
Good heavens, marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a very pleasant state, sir. I have had very little experience of it myself up to the present. I've only been married once, and that was in consequence of a misunderstanding between myself and a young person.
Not sure that I'm much interested in your life, Lane.
No, sir, it's not a very interesting subject. I never think of it myself.
Hmm. Sure you do. Thank you, Lane. That will do.
Thank you, sir.
Hmm.
Oh, it's Mr. Ernest Worthing, sir.
How are you, my dear Ernest? What brings you uptown?
Oh, pleasure. Pleasure. Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Oh, in the country.
What do you do there?
Well, when one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It is excessively boring.
And who are these people you amuse?
Oh, neighbours. Neighbours.
Got nice neighbours in your part of Shropshire?
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to one of them.
Oh, how immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire's your county, is it not?
Shropshire? Yes, yes, of course. Hello, why all these cucumber sandwiches? Why all these cups? Why such reckless extravagance in one so young? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta. And Gwendolen.
Oh, perfectly delightful.
Yes, that's all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolen is perfectly disgraceful. It's almost as bad as the way Gwendolen flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolen. I have come uptown expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
And how utterly unromantic you are.
Oh, I really don't see anything romantic about proposing. Yes, it's very romantic to be in love, but there's nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why, one may be accepted. One usually is, I believe. And then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. If I ever get married, I'll certainly try and forget the fact. Please do not touch the cucumber sandwiches I ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
But you have been eating them all the time.
Oh yes, well, that's quite a different matter. She's my aunt. Here, have some bread and butter. Gwendolen is devoted to bread and butter.
Very good bread and butter it is too.
My dear fellow, you behave as if you were married to her already. You are not married to her already, and I don't think you ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Well, firstly, girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right. And secondly, I don't give my consent.
Your consent.
My dear fellow, Gwendolen is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you'll first have to clear up the whole question of Cecily Lane.
Cecily? What do you mean? What on earth do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone by the name of Cecily.
Bring me that cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you had let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to Scotland Yard about it. It's very nearly offering a large report.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I mean, I happen to be more than usually hard up.
There is no need offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think that is rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, makes no matter for now that I look at the inscription inside. I find that the thing isn't yours after all.
Of course it's mine. You've seen me with it 100 times, and you have no right whatsoever to read what is written inside. It is a very ungentlemanly thing to read a private cigarette case.
Oh, it's absurd to have a hard and fast rule about what one should read and what one shouldn't.
I simply want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but this isn't your cigarette case. This cigarette case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily, and you said you didn't know anyone of that name.
Well, if you want to know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt.
Yes, charming old lady, lives in Tunbridge Wells. Just give it back to me, Algy.
Yes, but why does she call herself Little Cecily if she is your aunt and lives at Tunbridge Wells? From Little Cecily with her fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. That is a matter an aunt should be able to decide for herself. I just want my cigarette case back.
Yes, but why does your aunt call you her uncle? From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to an aunt being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, should call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all. It's Ernest.
It isn't Ernest. It's Jack.
But you have always told me it was Ernest. I've introduced you to everyone as Ernest. You answered to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I ever saw in my life. It's perfectly absurd you're saying your name isn't Ernest. It's on your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4 the Albany. I'll keep this as a proof that if you ever try to deny that your name is Ernest to me, or to Gwendolen, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Ernest in town, and Jack in the country, and the cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for the fact that your small aunt Cecily, who lives at Tunbridge Wells, should call you her uncle. Come, old boy, you had much better have the thing out at once. I may also remind you that I've always suspected you of being a confirmed Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean by a Bunburyist?
You have invented a very useful younger brother called Ernest in order that you may be able to come up to town as often as you like. I have invented a perfectly invaluable permanent invalid called Bunbury in order that I may be able to go down to the country as often as I choose. Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. If it wasn't for Bunbury's extraordinary bad health, for instance, I would be able to dine with you at Willis's tonight, for I have merely been engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine with me anywhere tonight.
I know. You're absurdly careless about sending out invitations. Nothing annoys people more as to not receiving invitations.
You had much better dine with your Aunt Augusta.
Ugh, I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the sort. To begin with, I dined on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. Besides, now to know you to be a confirmed Bunburyist, I naturally want to talk to you about Bunburying. I want to tell you the rules.
I'm not a Bunburyist at all. If Gwendolen accepts me, indeed I think I'm going to kill my brother. Indeed, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is a little too much interested in him. It's rather a bore. So I'm going to get rid of my brother, Ernest, and I strongly advise you to do the same with your Mr. with your invalid friend who has the absurd name?
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury, and if you ever get married, which seems to me to be very problematic, we'll be glad to know Bunbury. A man who marries without knowing Bunbury has a very tedious time of it.
That is nonsense. If I marry Gwendolen, and she is the only girl I have ever saw in my life that I would marry, I certainly won't want to know Bunbury.
Then your wife will. You don't seem to realize that in married life 3 is company and 2 is none. That must be Aunt Augusta. Only creditors or realtors ever ring in that Wagnerian manner. Now, if I get her out of the way for 10 minutes in order that you may be able to have an opportunity for proposing to Gwendolen, may I dine with you at Willis's tonight?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious about it. I hate people who are not serious about views.
It's Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Good afternoon, dear Algernon. I hope you're behaving very well.
I'm feeling very well, Aunt Augusta.
That's not quite the same thing, and in fact the two things rarely go together.
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart, am I not, Mr. Worthing?
Oh, you're quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
I hope I am not that. That would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry if we're a little late, Algernon, but I was obliged to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I've never seen a woman quite so altered. She looked 20 years younger. And now I'll have a cup of tea and one of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Certainly, Aunt Augusta.
Won't you come and sit here, Gwendolen?
Thank you, Mamma. I am quite comfortable where I am.
Good heavens, Lane, why are there no cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially. Oh.
There were no cucumbers in the market this morning, sir.
No cucumbers?
I went down twice.
No cucumbers?
No, sir. Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I'm greatly distressed, Aunt Augusta, about there being no cucumber sandwiches, not even for ready money. Oh.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I shall have to give up the pleasure of dining with you tonight.
I should hope not, Algernon. It would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, and I need hardly say a terrible disappointment to me. But the fact is, I've just had a telegram to inform me that my poor friend, Mr. Bunbury, is dreadfully ill again. You seem to think I should be with him.
It is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury is a dreadful invalid.
Well, I think it's high time this Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with this subject is absurd. Nor do I in any way approve of the modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Well, I shall be much obliged if you would be kind enough to ask Mr. Bunbury from me not to have a relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me.
Of course, the music is a great difficulty. You see, if one plays good music, nobody listens. If one plays bad music, nobody talks. But I'll run over the program I've drawn out if you'll kindly escort me into the next room for a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. That's very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. Gwendolyn, you will accompany me.
Certainly, Mamma. Certainly.
Charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax.
pray, don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I am always quite certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous.
Well, I do mean something else.
I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong.
And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence.
I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of suddenly coming back into a room that I have often had to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any other girl I've ever met since I met you.
Yes, I am quite well aware of the fact, and I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you've always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I knew I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals, and my ideal has always been to love someone of the name Earnest. That name inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon mentioned to me he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolen.
Oh, passionately.
Darling, you don't know how happy you've made me.
My own Earnest.
But you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest, do you?
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else, you know. Do you mean to say that you couldn't love me then?
It's clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference to the actual facts of real life, as we know them.
Well, personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, Gwendolen, I think there are lots of other much nicer names. Jack, for instance, I think a charming name.
Jack. No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. The only really safe name is Earnest.
Gwendolen, I must get christened. I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, surely you know that I love you, and you made it quite clear, Miss Fairfax, that you were not entirely indifferent to me.
I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched on.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any further possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I fully am determined to accept you.
Gwendolen.
Yes, Mr. Worthing? What have you got to say to me?
You know what I've got to say to you?
Yes, but you don't say it.
Gwendolen, will you marry me?
Of course I will, darling. How long you've been about it. I'm afraid you've had very little experience in how to propose.
I've never loved anyone in the world but you.
Oh, what wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite, quite blue. I hope you will always just look at me like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing, rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Ah, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing has not quite finished yet.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Pardon me, you are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I, or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. Engagement is something that should come on a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant as the case may be, and it is hardly a matter she could be allowed to decide for herself. Now I have a few questions to put to you, Mr. Worthing. As I make these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, shall wait for me below in the carriage.
Mamma.
In the carriage, Gwendolen.
Yes, Mamma.
You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
I feel bound to tell you that you are not down on my list of eligible young men. However, I'm quite ready to enter your name, should your answers be what a truly affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I smoke.
I'm glad to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some kind. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
29.
A very good age to be married at. I have always been of an opinion, Mr. Worthing, that a man who desires to get married should know either everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I'm very pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom is gone. The whole theory of modern education is radically unsound. Fortunately, in England, at any rate, education produces no effect whatsoever. If it did, it would prove a serious danger to the upper classes and possibly lead to acts of violence in Grosvenor Square. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In land or in investments?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. But between the duties expected of one during one's lifetime and the duties exacted of one after one's death, land has ceased to be either a profit or a pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. That's all that can be said about land.
Well, I own a country house with some land, of course, attached to it. About 1,500 acres, I believe. But I don't depend on that for my real income, you know, as far as I can make out. It's the poachers that are the only ones who can make anything out of it.
Country house? How many bedrooms? That point can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A girl with a simple and unspoiled nature such as Gwendolen could hardly be expected to reside in the country.
Well, I own a house in Belgrave Square.
What number in Belgrave Square?
149.
The unfashionable side. I thought there was something. However, that could be easily altered.
Do you mean the fashion or the side?
Both, if necessary, I presume. What are your politics?
Well, I really have none. I am a liberal.
Oh, they count as Tories. They dine with us, or come in the evening at any rate. Now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
Well, I've lost both my parents.
To lose one parent, Mr. Worthing, may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. Who's your father? He was evidently a man of some will. Was he born into what the radical papers call the purple of commerce, or did he rise through the ranks of the aristocracy?
Well, I don't know. The fact is, Lady Bracknell, I said I had lost both my parents. It would be nearer the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. I don't really know who I am by birth. I was found.
Found?
Yes, well, You see, the late Mr. Thomas Cardew, an old gentleman of very kindly and charitable disposition, found me and gave me the name of Worthing, because he happened to have a first-class ticket to Worthing in his pocket at the time. Worthing is a place in Sussex. It is a seaside resort.
And where did this charitable gentleman with a first-class ticket for this seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, a somewhat large black leather handbag with handles to it. You know, an ordinary handbag, in fact.
And in what locality did this Mr. James or Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station. It was given to him in mistake for his own.
The cloakroom in Victoria Station.
Yes, the Brighton line.
The line is immaterial, Mr. Worthing. Oh, I must confess I'm somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate bred in a handbag, seems to me to display a contempt for the ordinary decencies of family life. As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloakroom at a railway station may serve to conceal social indiscretion, and would hardly be regarded as an assured basis for a position in good society.
Well, then, would you please advise me what you would have me do? I mean, I need hardly say I would do anything in the world to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would strongly advise you, Mr. Worthing, to make an effort to produce at least one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly do that. I mean, I can produce the handbag at any moment. I mean, I really think that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What has it to do with me? You could hardly imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up with the utmost care, to marry into a cloakroom and form an alliance with a parcel. Good day, Mr. Worthing.
Good day.
Well, didn't it go off right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you? I know it's the way she has. She's always refusing people. I think it's most ill-natured of her.
Oh, Gwendolyn is right as a privet. As far as she is concerned, we are engaged. Her mother is perfectly unbearable. I've never met such a gorgon. I don't really know what a gorgon is like, but I am quite sure that Lady Bracknell is one. She's a monster without being a myth, which I think is rather unfair. I apologise, Algy. I suppose I shouldn't speak of your own aunt in that way before you.
My dear boy, I love hearing my relations abused. It's the only thing that makes me put up with them. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't got the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die.
You don't suppose that there is any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in about 150 years, do you, Algy?
All women become like their mothers. That's their tragedy. No man does. That's his. By the way, did you tell Gwendolyn about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Well, my dear fellow, the truth isn't quite the sort of thing one tells to a nice, sweet, refined girl.
Well, what about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Oh, by the end of the week I shall have got rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy quite suddenly, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary, my dear fellow. It's the sort of thing that runs in families. No, you'd much better say a severe chill.
You are sure severe chill isn't hereditary or anything of that kind?
Of course it isn't.
Very well. My poor brother Earnest carried off suddenly in Paris by a severe chill. That gets rid of him.
But I thought you said that Miss Cardew was a little too much interested in your poor brother Ernest. I mean, won't she feel his loss a good deal?
Oh, that's all right. Cecily is not a silly, romantic girl, I'm glad to say. See, she has a capital appetite, goes on long walks and pays no attention to her lessons.
I would rather like to see Cecily.
I will take very good care that you never do. She is excessively pretty and only just 18.
Have you told Gwendolyn yet that you have an excessively pretty ward who's only just 18?
One doesn't just blurt these things out to people. Cecily and Gwendolyn are perfectly certain to be extremely great friends. Yeah, I bet you anything you like that after half an hour after they've met, they will be calling each other sister.
Women only do that when they've called each other a lot of other things first.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word.
Algy, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Really, Gwendolyn, I don't think I can allow
Algy!
this at all.
My own darling.
Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mamma's face, I fear we never shall. But although she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing she can ever do can ever alter my eternal devotion to you.
Dear Gwendolyn.
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mamma, with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibres of my nature. Your Christian name has an irresistible fascination. Your town address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Walton, Hertfordshire.
How long do you remain in town?
Until Monday.
Good. Algy, you may turn around now.
Thank you, I've turned around already.
You will let me see your carriage, my darling?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
Glass of sherry, Lane?
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bumbering.
Yes, sir.
I probably won't be back till Monday. You can put up my dress clothes, my smoking jacket, and all my Bunbury suits.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow will be a fine day,
It never is, sir.
Lane. Lane, you're a perfect pessimist.
I do my best to give satisfaction, sir.
What on earth are you so amused at?
Oh, I'm just worried about poor Bunbury, that's all.
If you don't take care, your friend Bunbury will get you into a serious scrape someday.
I love scrapes. They're the only things that are never serious.
Cecily! Cecily! Surely such a utilitarian occupation as the watering of flowers is rather Moulton's duty than yours, especially in a moment when intellectual pleasures await you. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson.
But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well I look quite plain after my German lesson.
Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way.
Uncle Jack is so serious. Sometimes he's so very serious, I think he cannot be quite well.
Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanour is especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one with a higher sense of duty and responsibility.
Suppose that is why he often looks a little bored when we three are together.
Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Worthing has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and triviality would be out of place in his conversation. And you must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother.
I do wish Uncle Jack would allow that unfortunate young man, his brother, to come down here sometimes. We might have a good influence over him, Miss Prism. I know you certainly would. You know German and geology and things of that kind influence a man very much.
I do not think that even I could produce any effect on a man, according to his own brother's admission to be irretrievably weak and vacillating. As a man sows, so let him reap. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really do not see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to enter the wonderful secrets of my life. If I didn't write them down, I should probably forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry about with us.
I believe that memory is responsible for all 3-volume novels that Moody sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of the 3-volume novel, Cecily. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Did you really, Miss Prism? How wonderfully clever you are. I hope they did not end happily. I do not like novels that end happily. They depress me so much.
The good ended happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means.
I suppose so, but it seems terribly unfair. And was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript was unfortunately abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid.
But I see Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden.
Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that, and not about my German lesson when the rector entered.
I hope, Cecily, you are not inattentive.
No, I'm afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically. My metaphor was drawn from bees. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet?
We do not expect him until Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes. He usually likes to spend his Sundays in London. I shall see you both at evensong, no doubt.
I think, dear doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a slight headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism. With pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
Oh, that would be delightful. Cecily, you will read your political economy in my absence. Oh.
Horrid political economy, horrid geography, horrid German.
Mr. Earnest Worthing's just driven over from the station. He's brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. Uncle Jack's brother. Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Oh, yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I mentioned that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He said he was anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Pray ask Mr. Worthing to come out here.
Yes, miss.
You must be my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You must be under some strange mistake. I'm not little. In fact, I believe I'm more than usually tall for my age. I am, however, your cousin Cecily. You, I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
Oh, I'm not really wicked at all, Cousin Cecily. You mustn't think that I'm wicked.
Oh, well, if you're not wicked, you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you've not been leading a double life, pretending to be wicked and being really good all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Well, of course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
In fact, now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that. I'm sure it must have been very pleasant.
'Tis much pleasanter being here with you.
I don't understand how you could be here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
Oh, that is a great disappointment. I'm obliged to go up by the first train on Monday morning.
Won't you come in?
Thank you. Might I have a buttonhole first? I never have an appetite unless I have a buttonhole first.
A marshal meal?
I'd sooner have a pink rose.
Oh, why?
Because you are like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it could be right for you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things.
Then Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You're the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says all good looks are a snare.
They're a snare that every sensible man would like to be caught in.
Oh, I don't think I should like to catch a sensible man. I shouldn't know what to talk to him about.
You are too much alone, dear Dr. Chasuble. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never. Maturity can always be depended on. Ripeness can be trusted. Young women are green. Oh, I spoke horticulturally. My metaphor was drawn from fruits. Oh, where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing?
Mr. Worthing?
This is indeed a surprise. We did not look for you until Monday afternoon.
I have returned sooner than expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you are well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woes does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagance.
Still leading his life of pleasure.
Dead.
Your brother Earnest dead?
Oh yes, quite dead.
Oh, what a lesson for him. I trust he will profit by it.
Poor Ernest. He had many faults, but it is a sad, sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No, he died in Paris, in fact. I had a telegram last night from the manager of the Grand Hotel.
Was the cause of death mentioned?
Severe chill, it seems. Dr. Chasuble, I suppose you know how to christen, all right? I mean, you are still continually christening, aren't you?
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
But it is not for any child, dear Dr. Chasuble. No, I would like to be christened myself this afternoon, if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you have been christened already.
I don't remember anything about it. So, of course, I don't know if the thing would trouble you in any way, if you think I am too old now.
Not at all. The sprinkling and, indeed, the immersion of adults is a perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
You need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary. At what hour would you wish the ceremony performed?
Oh, I might trot around about 5, if that would suit you.
Perfectly, perfectly. And now, dear Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude any longer into a house of sorrow. I would merely beg you not be too much bowed down by grief. What seem to us bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
Uncle Jack! Oh, I am pleased to see you back. But what horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them.
Cecily!
My child, my child.
What's the matter, Uncle Jack? Do look happy. You look as though you had toothache, and I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother!
Who?
Your brother, Ernest. He arrived around half an hour ago.
What nonsense! I haven't got a brother.
Don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he is still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I'll tell him to come out. And you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
If we'd all been resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me particularly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. Good heavens!
Brother John, I have come town to town to inform you that I am very sorry for all the trouble I have given you, and that I intend to lead a better life in future.
Uncle Jack, you are not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest was just telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, and he goes to visit him so often. And there must be much good in one who is friends with an invalid and leaves the pleasures of London to sit by a bed of pain.
Yeah, he's been talking to you about Bunbury, has he?
Yes, told me all about his dear friend Mr. Bunbury and his terrible state of health.
Bunbury. Well, I won't have him talk to you about Bunbury or anything else.
Of course, I admit the faults were all on my side, but I must say I think Brother John's coldness of me is peculiarly painful. I expected a more enthusiastic welcome.
Uncle Jack, if you do not take your brother's hand, I will never forgive you.
Never forgive me?
Never. Never, never.
Well, this is the last time I shall ever do it.
I'm very happy.
You young scoundrels! You must get out of this place as soon as possible. I do not allow any Bunbury in here.
I've put Mr. Earnest's things in the room next to yours, sir. Suppose that's all right.
What?
Mr. Earnest's luggage, sir. Put it in the room next to your own.
His luggage?
Yes, sir. 3 portmanteaus, a dressing case, 2 hat boxes, and a luncheon basket.
I'm afraid I can't stay for more than a week this time.
Merriman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has suddenly called back to town.
Oh, yes, sir.
Oh, Cecily is a darling.
Well, not to talk of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it. You have got to leave by the 4:05 train.
I certainly won't leave as long as you're in mourning. It would be most unfriendly. If I were in mourning, you would stay with me. I suppose I should think it very unkind if you didn't.
Your vanity is ridiculous. Your conduct an outrage. And your presence in my garden is utterly absurd. However, you have got to leave by the 4:05 train, and I hope you will have a pleasant journey. This Bunbury, as you call it, has not been a great success for you.
I think it has been a great success. I am in love with Cecily, and that is everything. But I must see her before I go, and make arrangements for another Bunbury. Oh, there she is.
Oh, I merely came to water the roses. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he taking on a nice drive?
He's going to send me away.
Oh, then have we got to part?
Oh, that dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait, Merriman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss. Oh,
I hope, Cecily, I shall not offend you if I state quite frankly and openly that you seem to me to be in every way the visible personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you'll allow me, I'll copy your notes into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary and give anything to look at it? May I?
Oh, no. It is simply a young girl's reflection of her own thoughts and impressions, and subsequently meant for publication. But pray, don't stop, Ernest. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You may go on. I'm quite ready for more.
Cecily, ever since I first gazed upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, hopelessly.
oh. The dog cart is waiting, sir.
Tell it to come round next week at the same hour. Ugh.
All right, yes, sir.
Uncle Jack would be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying on until next week at the same hour.
I don't care about Jack. I don't care about anyone in the whole world but you, Cecily. I love you, Cecily. You will marry me, won't you?
Of course, you silly boy. Why, we've been engaged for the last 3 months.
For the last 3 months.
Yes, it'll be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
Oh. How did we become engaged?
Well, ever since Uncle Jack confessed to us that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course, the man who is much talked about is always very attractive. There must be something in him after all. Oh, I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
Darling. But when was our engagement actually settled?
On the 14th February last. Worn out of your entire ignorance of my existence, I determined to end the matter one way or another. So I accepted you under this dear old tree here. Oh, the next day, I brought this lovely ring with your name in it, and this is a necklace I bought you with the true lover's knot that I promised you always to wear.
Did I get you this? It was very pretty, isn't it?
And this is the box in which I keep all your dear letters.
My letters. But my own dear, sweet, loving Cecily, I've never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote always 3 times a week, sometimes oftener.
Do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh, no. They'd make you far too conceited. The 3 you wrote to me after I'd broken off the engagement are so beautiful, Even now, I can hardly read them without crying a little.
Oh, but was our engagement actually ever broken off?
Yes, on the 22nd of last March. You can see the entry if you like. Today I broke off my engagement with Ernest. I feel it is better to do so. The weather still continues charming.
Why did you break it off? What had I done? I have done nothing at all, Cecily. I'm very much hurt indeed to hear that you broke it off, particularly when the weather was so charming.
Well, it would hardly have been a really serious engagement if it hadn't been broken off at least once, Ernest. I forgave you before the week was out.
What a perfect angel you are, Cecily.
You dear romantic boy.
You'll never break off our engagement again, will you, Cecily?
I don't think I could now that I've actually met you. Besides, there's the question of your name.
Yes. Yes, of course.
You mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it had always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone whose name is Ernest. That name just inspires absolute confidence. In fact, I pity any woman who loves a man whose name is not Ernest.
But, my dear child, you do not mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name?
But what name?
Any name you like. Algernon, for instance, is a charming
Oh, I do not like the name Algernon.
But my own sweet, loving little darling, I really can't see why you should object to the name of Algernon. It's not really a bad name at all, and in fact, it's rather an aristocratic name. But Cecily, do you mean to say you could not love me if I had some other name? If my name was Algie, couldn't you love me?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character, but I fear I should not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is, I suppose, thoroughly experienced in the practice of all rites and ceremonials of the church?
Yes, Dr. Tadpole is a most learned man. He's never written a single book. You can imagine how much he knows.
I must see him at once on the most important christening, on the most important business.
Oh?
I shan't be more than half an hour.
Oh. Couldn't you make it 20 minutes?
I'll be back in no time.
Oh, I must enter his proposal in my diary.
Miss Fairfax has just called to see Mr. Worthing. Very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Oh no, Mr. Worthing went over in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Oh, pray ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. Oh, and you can bring tea.
Yes, miss.
Miss Fairfax? I suppose one of the many good elderly women associated with Uncle Jack and his philanthropic work in London.
There's Miss Fairfax.
Hey, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew, what a very sweet name. Something tells me we're going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other for such a comparatively short time. Pray, sit down.
I may call you Cecily, may I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolen, will you not?
If you wish.
Then that is all quite settled then, is it not?
I hope so.
Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be incredibly short-sighted. It is part of her system. So do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, not at all, Gwendolen. I'm very fond of being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose.
Oh, no, I live here.
Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also.
No, I have no mother, nor in fact any relations.
Indeed.
My guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I'm Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh, it is strange. He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him! He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I've liked you ever since I first met you. But I am bound to state now that I know you are Ernest Ward. I cannot help expressing I wish you were not quite so very alluring in appearance and perhaps a little older than you may seem to be. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
I do. I believe that whenever anyone has anything unpleasant to say, one should speak perfectly candidly.
Well, to speak with perfect candour, Cecily, I wish that you were fully 42 and more than usually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honour. But even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolen. Did you say Ernest?
Yes.
Oh, it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who's my guardian. It is his brother, his elder brother.
Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother.
I'm sorry to say they've not been on good terms for some time.
Oh, that accounts for it. Oh, Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud would come across a friendship like ours, had it not. Of course, you are quite sure it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is your guardian.
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be his. Oh.
I beg your pardon.
Dearest Gwendolen, there's no reason why I should make it a secret to you. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
I'm afraid there must be some slight error, Miss Cardew. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me.
There must be some misconception, Miss Fairfax. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
Well, it is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident. Pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read on the train. I'm so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I'm afraid I have the prior claim.
Sorry if it would cause you any mental or physical anguish, Miss Fairfax, but I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind.
Poor fellow has been entrapped into any foolish promise. I shall consider it my duty to rescue him, and with a firm hand.
Whatever entanglement my poor boy has gotten into, I will never reproach it with him after we are married.
You allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest to me, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? Oh, this is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners.
All I to say here as usual, miss.
Yes, as usual.
Are there many interesting walks in the vicinity, Miss Cardew?
Yes, a great many. From the top of one of the hills quite close by, one can see 5 counties.
5 counties? I don't think I should like that. I hate crowds.
I suppose that's why you live in town. Thank you, Merriman.
Quite a well-kept garden this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were so many flowers in the country.
Oh, flowers are as common here, Miss Fairfax, as people are in London.
Personally, I cannot understand how anybody can choose to exist in the country. That is, if anybody who is anybody does.
Oh, that must be what the newspapers are calling agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering from it very much at present. Something of an epidemic amongst them. Would you like some tea?
Thank you. Detestable girl, but I require tea.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Cake or bread and butter?
Bread and butter, please. Cake is rarely seen in the best houses nowadays. You have filled my tea with lumps of sugar. And there I ask most specifically for bread and butter. You have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other woman, there are no lengths to which I would not go.
The moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt that you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My first impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing on your valuable time. No doubt you have many other calls of a similar character to make in the neighbourhood.
Ernest, my own Ernest.
Gwendolyn, darling.
A moment. May I ask if you are to be engaged to this young lady?
The dear little Cecily? But of course not. What could have put such an idea in your pretty little head?
Thank you.
I knew there must be some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman who is now in our presence is my guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
Beg your pardon?
This is Uncle Jack.
Jack!
Oh, here is Ernest.
My love.
A moment, Ernest. May I ask you, are you to be engaged to this young lady?
To what young lady? Good heavens, Gwendolyn!
Mr. Good heavens, what I mean to Gwendolyn.
Of course not. Who could put such an idea into your pretty little head?
Thank you.
I'm afraid there must be some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman who is now in your presence is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Oh, Algernon Moncrief! Oh, are you really called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh,
Is your name really John?
I could deny it, if I liked. I could deny anything, if I liked. But my name is John. It has been John for years.
There is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Ernest, so it is of some small importance to know where your brother Ernest is at present.
Gwendolen. Cecily, it pains me very much to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life I've ever been forced to such a position. But I may tell you candidly that I have no brother, Ernest. I don't have a brother at all. I've never had a brother, and I've not the smallest intention of ever having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None.
Had you never a brother of any kind?
No. Not even of any kind.
It appears, Cecily, that neither of us are engaged to be married to anyone.
It's not a very pleasant position for a young girl to find herself in, is it?
No. Let us go into the house. They will not dare to venture after us there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose?
Yes, and a perfectly wonderful bunburying it is. The most wonderful bunbury I've ever had in my life.
Well, the only small satisfaction you can take from this whole wretched situation is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run down to the country so often as you used to, dear Algy. I think a very good thing, too.
Your brother is a little off colour, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
As for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, I think that you're taking in a sweet, innocent girl like that is perfectly inexcusable. To say nothing of the fact that she is my ward.
I can see no possible defence at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin.
I wanted to be engaged to Gwendolen, that is all.
I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
There is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew.
I don't think there's much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax ever being united.
Well, that is no business of yours.
If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It's very vulgar to talk about one's business.
How can you sit there calmly eating muffins when we are in this horrible trouble? I can't quite make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly, and it's the only way to eat them.
I say, it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all, under the circumstances.
When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I am in big trouble, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I'm eating because I am unhappy. Besides, I'm particularly fond of muffins.
Well, that is no reason why I should eat them all that greedy.
I wish you would eat tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens, I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden.
But you just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is a entirely different thing.
That may be, but the muffins are the same.
Algy, I wish to goodness you would go.
You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner first. It's absurd. I never go anywhere without my dinner. Besides, I've just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 6:15 under the name of Earnest.
My dear fellow, I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I will naturally take the name of Earnest. Gwendolen would wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest. It is absurd. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I haven't been christened for years.
Yes, but you have been christened already. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you're not quite sure about your ever having been christened, I must say I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. You could hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off in Paris this week by a severe chill.
The fact that they did not follow us into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They've been eating muffins. That looks like repentance.
They don't seem to notice us at all. Couldn't you cough?
Have a cough.
They're looking at us. What effrontery.
They're coming towards us. That's very forward of them.
Let us preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It's the only thing to do now.
This dignified silence seems to be producing an unpleasant effect.
A most distasteful one.
But we will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, there is just one question I would like to be permitted to put to you. Much depends on your reply.
Gwendolen, your common sense is invaluable. Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
In order that I might have an opportunity of meeting you.
Well, that certainly seems a satisfactory explanation, does it not?
Yes, dear, if you can believe him.
I don't, but that does not affect the wonderful beauty of his answer.
True. In matters of grave importance, style, not sincerity, is the vital thing. Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother named Earnest? Was it so that you might have an opportunity of coming up to town to visit me as often as possible?
Can you doubt it, Miss Fairfax?
I have the gravest of doubts upon the subject, but I intend to crush them. The explanations appear to be quite satisfactory. Which of us should tell them?
Oh, couldn't we both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. I nearly always speak at the same time as other people. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly.
1, 2, 3. Your Christian names are still an insuperable barrier.
That is all.
Our Christian names? Is that all?
We are going to be christened this afternoon.
For my sake, you are prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me, you're ready to face this fearful ordeal.
I am.
How absurd to talk of the equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage, which we women know absolutely nothing.
Darling! Oh.
Darling.
Gwendolen, what does this mean?
Good heavens!
Merely that I am engaged to be married to Mr. Worthing, Mamma.
Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin, I followed her at once by luggage train. You must understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease immediately. On this point, as indeed on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolen, Lady Bracknell.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now as regards Algernon. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
May I ask if it is in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Oh, no. Bunbury doesn't live here. Bunbury is somewhere else. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
I killed Bunbury this afternoon. Poor Bunbury died this afternoon.
What did he die of?
Oh, Bunbury? Well, he was quite exploded.
Exploded? Was he part of some revolutionary outrage?
My dear Aunt Augusta, I mean, he was found out. The doctors found out that Bunbury could not live. That is what I mean. So, Bunbury died.
Well, I'm glad that he made up his mind and came to some sort of definite action and acted under proper medical advice.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Worthing, who is that young person whom my nephew is glancing at in what seems to me a peculiarly unnecessary manner?
That lady is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily, Aunt Augusta.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know whether there is something peculiarly exciting in the air of this particular part of Hertfordshire, but the number of engagements that go on seem to me to be above the proper average. Mr. Worthing, is Miss Cardew at all associated with any of the larger railway stations in London? I merely desire information. Until yesterday, I had no idea that there were some persons or families whose origins were a terminus.
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, Gervase Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses often inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. But what proof have I of their authenticity? Gwendolen, the time approaches for our departure. We have not a moment to lose. As a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I should ask you if Miss Cardew has any small fortune.
Oh, I believe about £150,000 in the funds. That is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing. £150,000 and in the funds. Oh, Miss Cardew seems to me to be a most attractive young lady now that I look at her. Few young people today have any of the qualities that last and improve with time. We live, as I regret to say, in an age of surfaces. Pretty child. Algernon?
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew's profile.
Cecily is the sweetest, dearest, prettiest girl in the whole world, and I don't care tuppence about social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully about society, Algernon. Only those who can't get into it do that. Dear child, you know that Algernon has nothing but his debts to depend on. Well, I suppose I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell.
And you may call me Aunt Augusta in the future.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
The wedding, I think, had better take place quite soon.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
To speak frankly, I am not in favour of long engagements. They give people the opportunity of finding out each other's character before marriage, which I think is never advisable.
I beg your pardon for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but this engagement is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's guardian, and she cannot marry without my consent. My consent, which I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask? Algernon is an extremely, I may almost say ostentatiously eligible young man. He has nothing but looks everything. What more can one desire?
It pains me very much to have to speak to you quite frankly, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but the fact of the matter is I don't approve at all of his moral character. I suspect him of being untruthful.
My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He is an Etonian.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. See, this afternoon, during my temporary absence in London on an important questions of romance, he gained admission to my house under the false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he drank, and I've just been informed by my butler, an entire pint bottle of my Pierre Jouet Brew 89, wine which I was specifically saving for myself. Continuing his disgraceful deception, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon of alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes his conduct all the more heartless is that he was perfectly well aware from the start that I have no brother, I've never had a brother, and I don't intend to have one of any kind. I distinctly told him so myself yesterday afternoon.
After careful consideration, Mr. Worthing, I have decided entirely to overlook my nephew's conduct to you.
Oh, well, that is very generous of you, Lady Bracknell. My own decision, however, is unalterable. I decline to give my consent.
Sweet child, how old are you, dear?
I'm really only 18, but I always admit to 20 at evening parties.
18, but admitting to 20 at evening parties. Well, it will not be very long before you are of age, and free from the restraints of tutelage. I don't think your guardian's consent is, after all, a matter of any great importance.
Excuse me for interrupting you again, Lady Bracknell, but according to the terms of her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come legally of age until she is 35.
That does not seem to me to be a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. I see no reason why our dear Cecily shouldn't be even more attractive at the age you mentioned than she is at present. There will be a large accumulation of property.
Algy, could you wait for me till I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. You know I could.
Yes, I felt it instinctively. But I couldn't wait all that time. I hate even waiting 5 minutes for anybody, which makes me rather cross. I'm not punctual myself, I know, but I do like punctuality in others. And waiting, even to be married, is quite out of the question.
What is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states positively that she cannot wait till 35 to be married, a remark which I'm bound to say shows a somewhat impatient nature, I would beg of you to reconsider your decision.
But, my dear Lady Bracknell, the matter is entirely in your own hands. The moment that you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will most gladly allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
You must be aware that what you propose is entirely out of the question.
That a passionate celibacy is all that any of us can look forward to.
That is not the destiny I intend for Gwendolen. Algernon, of course, can choose for himself. Come, dear, we have already missed 5, if not 6 trains. To miss any more may expose us to comment on the platform.
Everything is quite ready for the christenings.
The christenings? Is that not somewhat premature, sir?
Both of these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate baptism.
At their age? Oh, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be baptized. I will not hear of such excesses.
Am I to understand, then, that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
I don't think, as things are now, it would be of much value to either of us, Dr. Chasuble.
I am grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing. Indeed, they savour of the heretical views of the Anabaptists, views that I have completely refuted in 4 of my unpublished sermons. However, as your present mood seems to be one peculiarly secular, I will return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed by the pew opener that for the last hour and a half, a Mr. Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Miss Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, lady, I'm on my way to join her.
Pray, allow me to detain you for a moment. This matter may be one of great importance for Lord Bracknell and myself. Is this Miss Prism a female of repellent aspect, remotely connected with education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies, and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
I am a celibate, madam.
Miss Prism, Lady Bracknell has been for the last 3 years Miss Cardew's esteemed governess and valued companion.
In spite of what I hear of her, I must see her at once. Let her be sent for.
She approaches. She is nigh.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I have been waiting for you there for 1 hour and 3/4.
Prism? Prism, where is that baby? 28 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, number 104 Upper Grosvenor Street, in charge of a perambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. A few weeks later, after the elaborate investigations of the Metropolitan Police, the perambulator was discovered at midnight, standing by itself at a remote corner of Bayswater. It contained the manuscript of a 3-volume novel of more than usually revolting sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism, where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit the shame that I do not know. I only wish I did. Plain facts of the case are these. On the morning of the day you mention, the day which is forever branded in my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in its perambulator. I had also with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I had intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction that I had written during my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, for which I can never forgive myself, I deposited the manuscript in the bassinet and placed the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit that handbag?
Oh, do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is a matter of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag that contained that infant.
I left it in the cloakroom of one of the larger railway stations in London.
What railway station?
Victoria, the Brighton line.
I must retire to my room for a moment. Gwendolen, you will wait for me here, won't you?
If you are not too long, I will wait here for you all of my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not even suspect, Dr. Chasuble. I need hardly tell you that in families of high position, strange coincidences are not supposed to occur. They are hardly considered the thing.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a most emotional nature.
Oh, this noise is extremely unpleasant. It sounds like having an argument. I dislike arguments of any kind. They're often vulgar and convincing.
It has stopped now.
Is this the handbag, Miss Prism? Examine it carefully before you answer. The happiness of more than one person depends on it.
It seems to be mine. Oh, yes. Here is the injury it received through the upsetting of a Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. Oh, here is the stain on the lining caused by an explosion of a temperance beverage. An incident that occurred at Leamington. Oh, and here on the lock are my initials. I had forgotten that in an extravagant mood I'd had them placed there. The bag is undoubtedly mine. I'm delighted to have it restored to me after all these years. It's been a great inconvenience being without it.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than just this handbag. I was the baby you placed inside it.
You?
Yes, Mother!
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? Oh, I do not deny that is a serious blow. Oh, but who has a right to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Mother, I forgive you.
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There is the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Blackmore, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am?
I'm afraid the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I always knew I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you young scoundrel, you'll have to behave to me with more respect in the future. You have never behaved to me like a brother in all your life.
Not till today, old boy, I admit. I did my best. However, I was out of practice.
Oh, my own. But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else?
Good heavens, I'd quite forgotten that point. Your position on my name is irrevocable, I suppose?
I never change, except in my affections.
What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen.
Then the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Oh, every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished upon you by your fond and doting parents.
Then I was christened. That is settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst.
Oh, well, naturally, being the eldest son, you were christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's Christian name?
I cannot at the present moment recall what the general's Christian name was, although I am quite sure he had one.
Algy, can't you recollect what our father's Christian name was?
My dear boy, we were never on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old.
His name would appear in the army lists of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta?
Oh, the general was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life, but I'm quite sure that his name would appear in any military directory.
The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have been my constant study. Marlem, Muxbum, Magley, what ghastly names they have. Moxley, Migby, Mobbs Moncrief, Lieutenant 1840, Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, General 1869. Christian names, Earnest John. I always told you, Gwendolen, that my name was Ernest, didn't I? Well, it is Ernest. I mean, it naturally is Ernest.
Yes, I remember now that the general was called Earnest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name.
Ernest, my own Ernest! I felt from the very first that you had no other name.
Gwendolen, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out that suddenly, all his life, he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you ever forgive me?
I can, for I feel you are sure to change.
My own one.
Laetitia!
Frederick, at last!
Cecily, at last!
Gwendolen, at last!
My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality.
Oh, on the contrary, Aunt Augusta. I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.